Welcome to the Bill Levinson Experience, a motivational podcast relating to the insurance brokerage industry and business in general. And now, here's Bill Levinson.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Bill Levinson with the Bill Levinson Experience podcast. With us today, we have a special guest speaker. And the reason why I say special, and I'm not taking this lightly, is Mike has literally worked with me and our team for 10 plus years now. And once again, the reason why I say special and not to take this lightly is because he has helped not only transform my life over the years, but also our company, our staff, our employees. He's come into our office live and sat with everyone. And, you know, we talked about being resilient and being positive and having a good energy and how customer service is number one. And, you know, we constantly spread that message, and he's been a huge part of our success. So real quick, he has also been our keynote speaker at a few of our expos over the last 7 to 8 years now. So our agents love listening to him. He really brings a great message. He's been with Tony Robbins Companies now for 16 years officially, unofficially 27 years. So he's worked with Tony, and it's so crazy because, you know, the way this whole thing turned out and how I met Mike was I personally have been a huge Tony Robbins fan since I was, 16 years old. And in fact, I love Tony so much that it's crazy. I don't even talk about this publicly, but I have a tattoo on my shoulder that is a Tony Robbins quote that says, "Every day in every way, I'm getting stronger and stronger." So that just goes to show you, you know, how much I love this guy, the company, the message, the energy, everything about what they bring to the table. So anyway, long story short, about 10 years ago, I meet Mike Savage, and another one of their employees introduced us. We instantly hit it off. We're about the same age. And what's neat is, you know, when you listen to Tony's stuff, you know, if it's on Netflix or through CDs or you read his books or the podcast, whatever it is, Mike is exactly like Tony. Okay, not physically. I think Tony Robbins is like 6'8", but Mike brings the same message, same energy, the same feeling, and he's been such a huge asset to Levinson and Associates, to me personally, and that's why I was delighted to share with you all his great story and his energy and his message, especially during a tough, challenging time that we're all going through, okay, in this entire world with COVID-19. So anyway, Mike, I appreciate you taking the time. He's been busier than ever with his executive coaching series. You know, he's got calls literally on the hour. So I appreciate you squeezing us in, and I know our audience is going to get lots and lots of value add out of today's podcast episode. So I want to take my hat off to you, Mike. Thank you again for taking the time and joining us.
I'm super excited to be here.
Well, we appreciate it. And I know by the time we're done in whatever it is, 40, 45 minutes, everybody's going to agree and see how every minute was well spent with us on the Bill Levinson Experience. Okay, so real quick, what's interesting is, you know, when you hear Mike speak, and hopefully you'll get to meet him in person, you're going to see how, you know, the energy is very similar, that we share the discipline, the enthusiasm, the same type of positivity. You know, I do these webinars once a week for our agents, and we get some great comments on how, you know, wow, Bill, you know, I was stressed out about, you know, certain sales or policies or whatever before the call, and now I feel like I can take on anything, you know, thanks for your insight. You know, you're going to hear that same exact feeling from Mike, okay, and that's what I love about him and his story. Also, I'm going to mention before we jump in, we have a lot of agents that use Mike for personal coaching, executive coaching, whatever you want to call it. One of them happened to be our guest speaker last month, Wally Berman, who was in his mid-70s and still growing his business year after year by leveraging all of our technology and, of course, with the combination of Mike's one-on-one coaching. So he also mentioned Mike on his podcast last month, but he is also available for you all. So, in fact, when we're done, right before we wrap up, I'm going to share some of his contact information in case you want to get started on some coaching. He is available for you. He's got a busy schedule now, but I'm sure just by being a Levinson agent, he'll work something out for you. Okay, so let's jump right in, Mike. If we can start, with just, how it all, take us back, how it all began for you growing up, how you met Tony and how he changed your life, maybe a little bit about your education and family, etc. Let's go back to day one, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely. I grew up in and around sales. My father, came out of the Army and went into sales, and we moved based on the sales opportunities that he had. So we came from New York, stopped in Virginia for a minute, eventually landed in Florida. And I would describe my family as a very hardworking, average middle class family, always looking for new opportunities. So my parents leaned into network marketing in the mid 90s, Amway and Excel and all the companies that took off in that industry in the mid 90s. And what went hand in hand with that industry at the time was personal development. My dad was already a fan because in sales he was reading, Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and the books that his generation kind of grew up in, and he, tapped into training his teams. And stumbled upon Tony Robbins, and him and his business partner invited a trainer from Robbins to come in, what they call a corporate trainer at the time. They go in and do presentations, kind of like what Doug did for you, right? Come in and do a training and encourage people to go see more of Tony. And I was at that training. I asked if I could be part of the training because I thought the business that my parents was really cool. And I was 14 years old at the time. And I won a ticket in that training. They gave away a ticket out of 500 people. I won the raffle. It totally looked staged. And the guy, I'll never forget, the guy turned red because the ticket went to the people who brought him in. So he did another raffle and gave away a second ticket just so it didn't look like, the owners gave a ticket to their son. And my parents dropped me off at the door. They didn't even come. They dropped me off at the door of a one-day Tony Robbins event, and I walked in, and here's all these people standing on chairs with energy, and I just thought to myself, like, what the heck did I just walk into? And he was teaching that day a program called The Competitive Edge. It was at the Tampa Convention Center, and it was on influence, negotiation, best practices in sales. And so you can imagine what a 14-year-old does with that information. But I influenced my teachers to let me out of class. It definitely helped me in dating a little bit. And I was intrigued at that point. At 14 years old, I learned some things that most other, kids, even adults, hadn't been given access to. I was extremely grateful. And at the end, Tony would kind of stand on stage and you could shake everybody's hand. And I remember I shook his hand, this huge guy, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I won a ticket." And he said, "Oh, I'm glad you came." And he said that I could come back to any events and to go speak to his staff. So I did. And there was another trainer at the time that had a Tony franchise. His name was Randy Zales, and Randy allowed me to come to a bunch of his events. And the guy who had given me the ticket, a guy named Wajid Salam, he allowed me to continue to kind of go to things that he did. And so I grew up going to all these personal development seminars. And even though my goal was to go to Ringling School of Art and Design, which I did, and draw comic books and work for Disney, and I played in that too, I always came back to personal development and volunteering and being in and around Tony's environment. I did that all through my late teens and early 20s. By the time I got to about 24, and had gone through their leadership trainings and program, I got recruited to come on as a coach. And I did some coach training outside of Robbins as well, just to kind of balance that perspective and make sure that I was taking it seriously as a professional, that I wasn't just kind of coasting along one line of thinking. I wanted to be very well-rounded. And I didn't plan on doing it. I had a mortgage company at the time. We were doing credit repair, which kind of went hand in hand with that. I had a 3D animation studio with a business partner. I was doing real estate. Coaching was not what my focus was. I in a million years, I didn't think I'd be doing this for as long as I have. And now I'm 41 years old, and I've been what they call a platinum and master coach at Robbins, and I do executive coaching. And I've traveled the world with Tony and feel very privileged to have someone as smart and as dedicated as he is to other people's growth as a mentor and as a friend in life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I heard that story before, and I love to hear that over and over. It's crazy. At 14 years old, obviously you walked in, you saw Tony, and you listened to the message, and even at that young of an age, how you still got it and said, you know what? I want to keep doing this. I want to look into this a little further. Like, that's amazing. Most 14-year-olds have, two things on their mind, and it's not Tony Robbins' personal development. So that's yeah.
I'll tell you, this isn't something I get to talk about, but there was one small piece of content that got me.
Yeah.
And it has stuck with me. It stuck with me for a long time. So, I learned at that event, we try to do more in a day. We overestimate what we can do in a day, underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. That stuck with me. He said, a life worth living is a life worth recording. That stuck with me. But the thing that hooked me is he started talking about the behavior of people, and he broke it down based on something called the values and lifestyle study. It was something that Stanford used to do. Now it's kind of its own entity. And they broke buyers down into belongers, achievers, emulators. There's, 5 or 6 different categories. And I remember him describing that an achiever would want to go out, and you'll remember this, back in the mid-'90s, and go get a BMW Z3. And at the time, that was like the hotness, right? That was one of the, that Roadster was like the thing. And he said, an achiever goes out and they get that and they feel it. And when they sit in it, it feels like they've rewarded themselves and they can feel good in it. And, and he talked about how it met their need for variety and their need for connection and their need for significance and maybe even their need for growth. And he said, but an emulator wants that lifestyle. They can't afford it. So they go out and buy a Mazda Miata. And I'll never, at 14 years old, I was scoping cars out. So I couldn't afford a Z3 at 14. So, of course, I was looking at the Mazda Miata and the Honda Del Sol at the time. And I'll never forget, I said, I will never be an emulator. I made a decision through that content at 14, I will be an achiever. I'm not going to settle for the cars that I don't want. I'm going to do what it takes to have those feelings and that lifestyle. And he hooked me in that moment. It's digital content, but it gave me a perspective to understand how people behave. And at that point, I became obsessed with not only looking at how humans behave, but achievement, which is probably why I hung around the guy as long as I have.
Oh, that I love it. And at 14, as soon as you heard about cars and the Z3, that all of a sudden, your antenna went up and said, "Well, wait a minute. Tell me more. How can
exactly.
I live this lifestyle?" Yep, it's crazy. I'm gonna just shift a gear for a second. Speaking of cars, I'm gonna tell you real quick. I think it's interesting hearing you, and I wasn't even gonna bring this up, but for me, I'll just talk about this quickly, and then we'll move forward. But I remember, I'll never forget. Like you always heard of Tony Robbins, this big guy who was in some movies, and he's got this sales pitch and blah blah blah, and and really the truth of the matter is it's not a sales pitch. It's a way of life, and for me, it's exactly what I needed at 17 years old when I moved to Tampa with my aunt. And Tony Robbins, to me was just like I just said, just some guy that was selling a sales pitch, and I had no idea what he was really about. So my aunt was in sales for a big radio station in Tampa. So I moved up there, and she wanted me to work with her, be kind of like her assistant, and travel with her to different appointments. And I said, fine, I'm open, and at that time, I didn't really have a set plan. I was all over the place. So long story short, I'm going in the car every morning with, her name's Tammy, on the way to her office, and then we go to different appointments throughout the day. And every time we get in the car, I'm used to listening to, whatever, hip hop music and rock and roll music. And she's listening to, at the time, these cassette tapes from Tony Robbins. And she's playing them over and over and over. And I'm like, Tammy, like, I can't take this anymore. Like, let's put in some music here. She says, no, Bill, you don't understand. I have to get in this mindset every day on the way to these appointments and on the way to my office so I can also be positive and I'm at the right place mentally. So I was like, oh, my God, like I was ready to put a gun to my head. I hated listening to this. And I'll tell you what, after like 2 or 3 weeks, I listened to a couple chapters that were very relatable. Again, talking about, cars and putting things into perspective. And all of a sudden, I related to this man at the time, this guy, Tony Robbins. And I was like, wait a minute, what he just said makes sense. And I feel like he's talking to me. And just like you, I got so into it. I started to obsess over this Tony Robbins. I bought, at the time, every cassette library that he had, and then eventually CDs. And then, I started to talk to my parents and my friends about it. Some people looked at me like I was crazy, but I got so into it, like I was obsessed. And in fact, that's when I got the tattoo on my arm, and it became a way of life. And I'm going to tell you, I would not be where I am today. And I still have a long way to go, but I would not be in the place I am today if it wasn't for Tony Robbins and the message. And then, of course, when you came along, Mike, and how you kind of shifted my thinking once again. But anyway, it made me think of that story with the cars and Tony, and I remember hearing that same stuff. It's freaking awesome. Okay, all right, so let's jump right in here. In the essence of time, I just want to keep moving along. So there's no way to avoid this big elephant in the room, as we know, and that's this coronavirus issue that we're all dealing with. Very challenging times, COVID-19. It's crazy to me to see how this entire world has changed and shifted over the last few months. I mean, it's just insane. So I wanted Mike to talk about, his perspective on this. What are some of the stories, he's hearing or seeing, and most important, what can our agents think about when dealing with this, selling from home? It's a whole new environment. And I feel like what was relevant, 6 months ago or a year ago is totally different today. And I feel like now is the time we have to make that mindset shift. And once again, shift gears, because it's a whole new world right now. And we all want to be on the opposite side coming out of this and be in a strong place and make sure we're better than ever when this is all over. So I just wanted to get your take on this, Mike, if you want to spend a minute on what's going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We're used to economic cycles. That's nothing new. And so the idea that we need to be prepared for summer when things are going well, and by the way, we were just in the summerest of all summers. We were the winning, if I can borrow a phrase from the guy who likes to talk about winning, the winning was big. Economically, things are going great. And normally we're used to spring, summer, fall, and then winter. And because of 2008, we were all kind of looking at when fall was coming. Nobody was expecting a hard stop into winter, right? But here we are. We have gone from summer to winter almost overnight. And I think people have to keep a couple things in mind from a business and performance perspective. First, most economic shifts are competitive, meaning, the U.S. economy goes through a debt bubble, right, or a lending bubble. But at the same time, maybe the euro is doing well. Maybe, the yen starts to go up. So it's competitive. And those market shifts are handled very different. That means there's opportunity for money to be moved, for investors that could invest to come in, and things shift differently. This is something else. Every country has to go into, quantitative easing, kind of, printing money and stimulating their economy. Every country has to, encourage their banking systems to go on 2, 3, and 4 months deferment in payments. And every utility is looking at how they reduce costs, and every country is putting stimulus out and in their own way. And some countries that haven't yet, they're going to catch up. So the playing field is level globally, right? So just because we have a stimulus package doesn't mean we're weakening against another country or against another currency. So we don't have to deal with those fears, if that makes sense. And I want to put that out there because some people feel like this is that, and it's not. It's totally different. Now, a pause like this economically gives everybody interesting opportunity to take a look at how season-proof their business really is. It's an unknown. There's so many different data sets, so many different opinions on how people can handle this from a medical perspective and a social perspective. And I don't know if we want to dive into those deeply, but from an economics perspective, those that have good practices and discipline and have done a great job building relationships, I got to tell you, I've been on 80 coaching calls a week for the last 2 weeks. The minute things shifted, my calendar filled up. And some of my businesses that I coach are struggling, but a lot of them, because they've focused on season proofing and they've done the basics and they engage in the foundational stuff, they're busy. And I know that you're finding that a lot of the people that you work with are doing great. And it's because they've built the relationships and they've set their business up to be season proof. What this is from a business perspective is an opportunity for people to pause and take a look at how they've been doing business. It's easy to win when things are going great. The question is, do you have your business set up to win when things are challenging, right? We go into the stats about how, 1 in every 100 businesses last 10 years, this is the opportunity where you have a chance to look and see if your business is set up to win.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's a great way to look at it. And I think that, I remember pushing, e-applications and drop tickets and CRM tools. And we built this new Amazon for insurance. And, a lot of our competitors, they would talk and say, oh, they're way too early for this. They're wasting their time and their resources on putting a platform like this together. Our industry isn't quite there yet. And instead of saying, what, maybe they're right and maybe we could save $100,000 and kind of put this off for a little bit, why not be early to the game? Because you never know what can happen. So here we are sitting in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic, right? And the platform that we've been developing the last 7 years, the timing couldn't have been better. We launched it last Thursday, okay? Just think about that, last Thursday. We've been working on it for 7 years, and now all of those same competitors that were saying we're early to the game, it's a waste of time and money, now they're coming to us saying, hey, how can we partner with you so we can market your platform to our agents and basically play defense? So, anyway, I'm not trying to toot our own horn, but I think the point is this is a great opportunity for you to learn and say, you know what, I have to innovate and I have to learn about the new technology and resources that are available because you never know what can happen. And look what we're going through now. So that's a great example, Mike. And I just wanted to point that out. I think that, again, this is a time, look in the mirror and see what you could have done differently and what you're going to do differently moving forward because you just never know. So I love that. Anything else, Mike? Yeah.
Absolutely. To that, and, Tony talks about the 3 mandates of leadership. And if you own a business, whether you like it or not, you've chosen a position of leadership. You lead in your industry, you lead your customers, they trust you. So you have to take it seriously. And the mandates of leadership are, number 1, see things as they are, not worse than they are. And so people have just as important as social distancing is right now, you need to fear distance, right? Like anybody who is getting sucked too much into the fear has to take a step back and look at real data sets and kind of step into their common sense corner about, some of the things that are going on. Because it is the media's job to keep eyeballs on the screen. They have more ratings and more eyeballs than ever before right now, and So make sure that they fear distance and do their own research, their own deep research. But then the second mandate is have a vision for it getting better. And the third mandate is make that vision real, right? So see it as it is, not worse than it is. Have a vision for it getting better, and then make that vision real. And to launch a new vision that makes things accessible to people in the middle of this, it means you see it better than it is, right? Not Pollyanna, but you look and you say, this too shall pass. We're human, we're strong, we're resilient. Innovation, Steve Jobs said this, innovation distinguishes between leaders and followers. Right, so if you find yourself in any situation where you're not innovating your conversation, you're not innovating with technology, you're not innovating your approach, then the likelihood is you're still following and not leading. So you want to find people that are innovating right now. And it's extremely important. It's extremely important that people innovate and how they can do that today. And Tony kind of talked about this. He talked to some of our platinum partners and did a great call. And he said, listen, you got to watch how you spend your time. And how I kind of interpreted it and broke it down was 5% or less of your time on news, right? Don't get sucked into, 20% of your day is watching the news. Watch the press briefing, but stay away from the commentary afterwards. So stay informed, but not programmed, right? Watch it, make your own conclusions. Don't sit there and let them tell you what to think. And then 20% of your time has to be on innovation, not problem solving your current business, thinking about what you're going to do differently, because the job you had 2 weeks ago is not the job you have now. After 30 to 60 days, people form radically new habits, right? We used to hear the adage. You go ahead.
Hey, Mike, real quick, I hope everyone is taking some notes. I always say this at the beginning, but what Mike is talking about right now, for most of you that are working from home, this is crucial. So I would definitely jot this down, and it will help you. All right, Mike, sorry about that.
No, and this is why we said this. It's like, how do you manage your time now that we all work from home? So it's 5% on media, no more, maybe even less if you can, right? Keep it mostly focused on 20% on thinking time, meaning not looking at current problems in your business, innovating, thinking, reading new books. There's a guy named Keith Cunningham. He's got a book called The Road Less Stupid. It's filled with questions, chapter by chapter, to help you critically think about your business. He's been a mentor to Tony, to Robert Kiyosaki for decades. Very intelligent man. And his book helps you critically think, ask the questions that force you to look at your business. 20% of your time there. 25% of your time on self-care. Spending time with your family, meditating. For God's sake, physical activity, working out, building your immune system up with physical activity right now, because the best way to fight coronavirus is a strong immune system. That's what anybody can do is just do the things to strengthen your immune system. So self-care, 25% of your time, then the other 50% of your time on your current business. And what most people have to understand is there are fires that were lit because of this that you're going to have to let burn. That it may be okay to let some of those things burn and instead focus on how do you move forward. Some people are getting sucked into trying to stop something that is inevitable. And that's where they have to get an acceptance that they weren't prepared, but think about how do they prepare now. And preparation is key. And I go back to a story that Tony tells about when he was with Nelson Mandela. And he asked Nelson Mandela, Tony's great about asking questions. So he's interviewing Mandela, and he turns to him and he says, you were wrongfully in prison for 27 years. How did you survive? And Mandela stood up. And, when the president stands, everybody else stands. So Mandela stands up. Everyone in the room stands up. Tony stands up. And Mandela looks him in the eye and he says, I didn't survive. I prepared. Oof. So what Mandela did is, while he was in prison, he thought about what was happening socially. He learned Afrikaans so he could come out of prison and speak the language of the enemy that he wanted to influence. And what did he do? He came out, he shook the hands of de Klerk and the people that had put him in prison, and he said, let's create peace. And in short order, he did that in a country that was ravaged, right? So preparation is key. This is a time where you prepare not only your state to deal with current situations that you're facing. So every day you prepare yourself mentally to face what's more of a challenge, but then prepare for spring, prepare for summer. You do that by innovating. Innovation is key to preparation today. So when we look at this and we say, how do you handle it and what's going on? So many people are focused on the challenges that they're trying to stop, instead of looking and saying, if this is a reset button, what do I need to do to win moving forward?
I love that, Mike. That's a great way to look at it. And isn't it crazy how, you hear Mike's perspective on this, and then, if you're talking to your social circle, friends, family, and you'll talk to 10 people, and 7 of the 10 are like, oh my God, worst time ever. I don't know how I'm going to make it another week. I don't know what I'm going to do this Saturday and Sunday. I have so much time on my hands, and I just bought a bicycle, and I'm going nuts and stir crazy. And then listen to what Mike just said. And they're both looking at the same exact situation, but it's just a different perspective, a different take on it. And if you do what Mike said, and I'm doing exactly that, and I'm going to shift even more, you're going to come out of this on the other side 100 times stronger. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? So that was great, Mike. Any other stories or I know you do a lot of coaching. I know you're also in, that Tony Robbins social circle between your trips to Fiji and some of your platinum clients. Is there anything that you can share, that may be a success story from this, or anything that you want to touch on before we move into the next part here?
Yeah. We were on a call with the platinum partners, and I'm blessed to have access to such an amazing peer group. For people who don't know, at Robbins, there's a group of people that absolutely commit it at a very high standard. They invest a ton of money to be in a small group, and they travel the world with us. And they get the best coaches. They get private events with Tony, and he does some very special things with them. So he did a call. And one of the platinum partners, he and his wife, great energy. They very much are about contribution, and they're always helping other people out. But he's been in the middle of a battle with bone cancer, and he ended up with COVID-19. And, of course, everybody's heart went out, and we were all leaning in to see how he was doing. I'm going to keep his name private. It's something that's just shared in the group. But he had nothing more than, at the end of the day, a bit of a cold and a small fever for about 3 days. And he came out of it on the other side, and he feels like he wants a wristband that says, I already had it, so he can go out like a warrior in public and spend money at the businesses that are open and show people that it's perfectly fine on the other side. And, we talk about concern with people that are, immunocompromised, and we should be, right? We want to make sure those people are safe, and that we do our best to make sure that we create an environment where if they do catch it, they have access to healthcare. That is wise, for us to consider, all of us. But this is a guy who, because he had focused while he was going through this on keeping a strong immune system, keeping his vitamins up, taking advantage of some of the practical things we're being told, zinc and vitamin D and vitamin C and elderberry and, exercise and hydration, he was able to come out of the other side of it. And it was inspiring to hear that, because if there was anybody who would have struggled, it would have been somebody in that situation. So while we're getting a lot of death tolls, there's a lot of people, there's also the survival rate. And to hear stories like that means that, with the right mindset, with joy in your heart and gratitude, along with keeping yourself as healthy as you possibly can, you can mitigate or reduce any of the fear that has to exist inside of you. By the way, he did this while taking care of his companies, while doing what we're all doing and looking at stimulus packages and opportunities to take advantage of, the support that the government's giving us. Like, we're all busy. We've all got our heads wrapped around it. But just imagine someone who's also going through bone cancer, also had COVID, still staying on top of their game through this. It tells us that it's possible for us to do that too. We just have to make the choice, right? We have to make the choice to look at someone like that and say, if I am stressed right now, if I'm challenged, I'm nowhere near having those challenges. Maybe my situation isn't so bad after all.
Love it. Yep. And it's so true. It all starts with what's upstairs, and then everything else goes from there. And that's the way I look at everything in life. You have to get your mind right, and then you go to step 2. Okay, let's move forward here. So that was great stuff. But we're going to shift gears again because every podcast has to do with cars, and Mike brought it up this time, not me. But I'm gonna move on here, and obviously Mike has been trained by some of the best, since he was 14 years old. So I'm interested to hear your take on this. If you could go back, let's say, 15 years, what would you tell the younger Mike that maybe would have helped you even more, or maybe you would have went in a little different direction? Anything that you would have done differently?
That's a great question. We get asked that a lot as speakers, and I don't have a coined answer. I always check in with myself in the moment when somebody asks me that. And today, what I would tell you is I would tell myself 15 years ago, save even more. And what I mean by that is this is always an opportunity for us to look at what Tony calls our money machine, right? That business we set up that has, investment vehicles in it, it's a business with no employees, no to low overhead that works for us over 18 to 20 or 30 years. And that compounding environment is how we build long-term wealth. And while I'm proud of what I've done in that area, I would go tell myself 15 years ago, do more. Spend less on things, keep life a little simpler, invest at a deeper level, not just for myself, but I have a daughter. So it's setting not only myself up, but my daughter up for that generational wealth plan. And while I'm very proud of what I have done and the things I've learned from Tony and from other mentors, I would tell myself, make that percentage that I take out of my income that I've committed, which is probably the most important financial decision anyone can make, is what's that percentage you're committed to putting into your investments? I would make that percentage bigger.
And what's ironic is most of our audience are in the financial services business. So there you go. There's another story that you can share with your podcast.
I just got a standing ovation.
Yeah, exactly. I just saw about 30 hands go up at the same time. I love it. Love it. And it's true. It's great stuff. Okay. All right. Let's move forward to the next question. And everyone can learn a little bit here. And obviously, everyone has their different opinion in this, and which is there's no right or wrong answer. But I'm interested to hear Mike's take. What motivates you every day to do the best you can and get bigger and better, on a personal and a business level? Is there something that, if it's yoga or church or temple or working out or a mentor, anything that helps you stay laser focused day in and day out?
I'm going to say all of the above. Look, we're you and I are cut from I think, the same space in that physical activity is key. My belief is that physical resistance helps us deal with mental resistance. We have way more information coming at us today than ever before. Our customers expect that we work at a speed that demands so much of us, right? And by the way, we demand that of the places we do business with too. So we don't get to ask our customers to exempt us because we demand it, right? So we have to step up and move at the speed of business today. And those are new stresses, and they're ever changing. And so the way to handle that mental resistance is to have some physical resistance. And where we back into that belief, as coaches, is to say, look, there's intellectual mastery of things, which means you get it cognitively, you're smart. There's emotional mastery, which means you lean in at a different level. It starts to move you. But then there's physical mastery, where you get in your nervous system, where you start to train your unconscious mind to move and act in a certain way. And I really believe that physical resistance done well with incantations and focused on the right things at that time really helps you achieve at a different level. And if anybody wants to test that, just start walking for 30 minutes, maybe while you're on a call. Tony talks about net time, no extra time. Maybe while you're on a conference call, instead of sitting, take a walk, right? And give yourself some physical activity for 10 days. Do some deep breathing, stay hydrated. That alone will begin to give you improved mental clarity and focus. And from there, if you make a commitment for 30 days or 60 days, you'll form a new habit. But I really believe that's first. You've got to take care of the body, and then the body will take care of you.
Yep, that's exactly what my answer would have been, and that's spot on, Mike. I look at, and again, you don't have to be a fitness queen or king, to be on track every day. I'm not saying that by any means, but, it's just crazy. If you're into, walking or running or the gym, whatever it is fine. Even yoga classes, great. But if you look at those things compared to, life and in business, right? I think about this all the time. Those days, I always go to the gym, right after work. For me, it works in the later afternoon, usually around 6, 7, 8 o'clock, whatever it is. But I have to go every day because I have to get to that mental state when I finish my workout session. Like I could have the worst day ever or the best day ever. When I leave the gym, I'm in the same neutral place, and that's my happy place. That's when my best thoughts come up and everything else works out for me. But if you think about this for a minute, think about those tough days, you're driving to the gym or you don't want to go on the walk around the block or the bike ride or the run, right? And you're having a horrible day, but you force yourself to do it. Those are always the best sessions, yoga, working out, your run, whatever it is. It's just the way it is. And if you can relate that to life and to business and to your job, whatever it is, it's the same exact thing. So when things get real tough and you have to force yourself, I don't care what anyone says, those are the best days. I'm telling you right now, it's a fact, at least in my life, and I want all of you to try it if you're not already experiencing that, because that's exactly the way I look at it, and it's been working for me. So it's been 23, 25 years now, and it's been awesome. But I love that. Okay, let's move forward here. By the way, we're just about done. I know we're running a little behind, and I want to keep this short, sweet, right to the point. And, of course, my goal is that everyone walks away with great nuggets of information. I think story time is the best. I think that they always say, facts tell, stories sell. I want to ask Mike this question. If you have a good story, business, personal, doesn't matter, maybe a life-changing moment, maybe when you were hired by Tony Robbins, most of us will never get to meet the kind of people that you surround yourself with, okay, unfortunately. Fortunately, you can share some of those stories with us. Is there anyone that stands out that you can share with the audience that maybe was a life changer for you?
Absolutely. We don't just teach the work that we do at Robbins, we do the work. And one of the things that I learned from Tony at an early age was that the quality of the questions that we ask will absolutely direct where our mind goes and ultimately deliver the quality of the life that we live, right? We've got to ask quality questions. And at our Date with Destiny program, which is really about like looking at your wiring, the mission statement that runs in your head, the values that drive your decisions, the vision you have for your relationship, the virtues that you live by and hold yourself accountable to. It's a deep dive, right? And the Netflix documentary kind of shows some of the heavier content, but the truth is the personal work at that event is amazing. And so I've participated in that event at this point 4 times. Even though I work for the company, I go about every 5 years. And the last time I participated was in 2016. And we always uncover what we call primary question. And for years, I thought my primary question was, am I doing this right? So what we do is we uncover the question that runs like a broken record in our head. And there's a process we go through to do it. And when you uncover the question, you can figure out, is that a resourceful question? And is that question costing you something? So a question like, am I doing this right? The upside is it caused me to refine things. I was constantly looking for quality and making sure things were done right. But the challenge is it kept me in a constant state of uncertainty. So I had to shift that question. And I came up with a new question. And for years, that new question served me well. But in 2016, I opted not to be a trainer at the event, but to participate. And I participated with another trainer. And as she and I were doing some deep work, and Tony went into some new content that he was teaching about being in a beautiful state, as he went through the beautiful state content and we started primary question, I came up with a deeper question. And that deeper question that I found out was, how can I be safe? And if you think about operating from a life where you're asking a question, how can I be safe? It holds you back from taking risk, from taking chances. Now, as an entrepreneur, I've taken chances my whole life, but then there's always this retraction. There was always this stress. And so imagine living with the desire to grow, living with the desire to be an achiever and not an emulator, to have the Z3 but not the Miata, but then to retract every time you make the decision to go for it. And so internally, it felt like a crazy eight. And through the power of uncovering one question, how can I be safe? And then unwiring it, scrambling it, making sure it wasn't the broken record that was running every morning, coming up with a more empowering question, like how can I contribute even more to those around me, right? Or how can I serve those around me to be creative, resourceful, and whole in this moment? Like asking that kind of question now puts me in a different space. So when Tony talks about the power of questions, we're not just talking about great questions you can ask in a moment, but really doing the work to find out what's running you, right? And so that was a life-changing moment for me that just happened, 5 years ago, 4.5, 5 years ago. And it's put me in a radically different place, both as a coach, but also as a father, right? And as someone who helps my community, right? To not feel like I have to question whether I'm safe or not anymore, whether I did it consciously or unconsciously, created a whole new level of freedom. So I encourage everyone, take a look at how you think and do the work to examine that, because it can remove those unconscious roadblocks that hold you back from the life that you deserve, from the fulfillment that you deserve. And even if you just remove that level of stress, that underlying, that little undercurrent, even if you're a happy person, if you feel an undercurrent of anxiety or stress or fear, it's likely that you got to do some work to figure out what those questions are that are running in your mind, and how do you scramble them and then install some new opportunities to think differently. So it was that moment. It was that singular moment, that piece of content radically changed the last few years of my life.
That's crazy. It's like one question to yourself changed your outcome, changed your path for the next few years, probably forever now at this point. But it's
absolutely
asking
forever.
The right question. Yep, I actually learned that from Tony's stuff too, and from you. So I love that. And again, I said this a few times already. It's time to look in the mirror, especially during this time, because lots of us have some extra time on our hands. Okay, that was great. Now, especially, again, during a time like this, okay, we all have obstacles, okay, bad days, stress that we're encountering, I'm sure more now than ever before. I want to hear your take on this, Mike, because, I don't care what level you're at with your training and coaching, you have those days, like it or not. And what helps you plow through those days and stay motivated and stay focused? Is there any advice that you can give to the audience? Obviously, we talked about working out and, whatever it is, some kind of physical activity. Anything else that you can recommend?
Absolutely. We teach state management, but the truth is you can't state your way through life, right? Like if you wake up and by the second or third day, you're still feeling frustrated, making your move and getting in state is going to help you in a moment, but it still doesn't it's like weed whacking, right? You got to go in and pull the roots out. You can't just weed whack. And so what I look at in those moments is like really reflecting. And if I find myself in a tough state, if I'm not able to think my way through things, I pull out a sheet of paper and I just start to write. And here's why. Sometimes when you just start to mind dump and get everything out, right, it's a release. It's a release. And as leaders in business, sometimes we struggle with finding like a safe space to do that. Like who do we turn to when we're the leader? So if you just turn to a sheet of paper, the mind wants to solve every problem for you. And so you get that out, and instead of it rummaging around in your head going in circles, it physically moves out of your head onto paper, and it's almost like you can put it away. And, Tony's encouraged journaling for years, and I don't, some people want to capture, but sometimes journaling is about the release. And we have to remember that if we're feeling something, if we're feeling frustrated, or if we're facing an obstacle and it's challenged and we're feeling stress is a feeling. Anxiety is a feeling. right? So people say, I'm stressed. No, you're not. You're feeling stressed. And feelings are signals that we need to pay attention to something. So if in that moment where you're feeling stressed, you can train yourself to say, okay, what is this stress telling me? What message is anxiety trying to give me right now? You can get into a resourceful place where you can at least go down a path and problem solve it, understanding that those challenging feelings are there to serve you just as much as your good feelings are there to serve you. And that takes training, right? And I'm by no means someone who has mastered doing that every single time. We're all human. But the more you lean into writing and then examining the feeling and seeing what it is and asking, what is this stress here for? And getting honest about it. Again, we go back to a great question, right? How is this stress serving me? What is this anxiety trying to tell me? Maybe it's telling me you need to step away for 30 minutes and just go take a walk and get some fresh air. Allow yourself thinking time, which doesn't mean you're on your phone. It doesn't mean you're on a phone call. It doesn't mean you're watching TV. It also doesn't mean you go to the refrigerator and open it for the 5th time. It means go outside and get some fresh air, go meditate, and give your mind an opportunity to rest and bring some thoughts together for a minute. And so that how I handle it is some meditation, some journaling, and some thinking time more than anything. Sometimes our mind just needs to be removed from the constant distractions and allow those thoughts to coalesce and finish themselves. And so I do that for myself. I'd encourage everyone to make that a practice.
Love it. Love it. That journaling stuff works. Okay. If you haven't tried it, don't laugh and say, oh, I don't have time for this, or, it sounds crazy. It works. I started doing this about 6 months ago before bed most nights. And I'm telling you, to compare notes and get your thoughts out, it really, it helped change the direction that I was going in. And I'll tell you, it works. Those incantations Mike was talking about, that stuff really works. It sounds crazy. I'm going to sit here and say, I'm getting stronger and stronger every day in every way. I'm going to say it 30 times until I see muscles popping out of my head. It doesn't work like that, but I'm telling you, as far as state of mind, it puts you in the right direction. It's like that old, looking in the mirror and smiling thing, and then all of a sudden, you're in a different state. That stuff works. If you haven't tried it, I'm encouraging everyone on this call to give it a shot, and I hope you write this down as another note, because I'm telling you, it works, especially at times like this. Okay, our last question here is for the younger generation. We have a lot of millennials on the call. We have a lot of agents that are coming out of retirement. We have agents all over the place. And this question comes up a lot, okay? And it's, what advice, Bill or Mike, do you have, that can help everyone and that can help me in my business or on a personal side? Is there a certain book, maybe mentorship, maybe coaching, a parent, any advice you can give the audience on staying focused and disciplined and learning and growing? I know you spoke about a book earlier that I thought was helpful. Anything else that you want to add before we wrap this up?
Yeah, absolutely. I would take a cue from some industries that have season-proofed themselves, right? So I can't tell you how many times the auto industry has had to reinvent itself, right? And they're doing it again. They're doing it again right now. And as they lose margin in one area, they find new products that help them still, continue to create opportunity for their people. And they're going to go through change and it's disruptive. But as an industry for years, the business owners have done what they call 20 groups, which means if I own a dealership in Florida, I get with a guy who's got a dealership in Virginia and a guy who's got one in Wyoming and a guy who's got one in California. And quarterly we visit each other's locations and we share best practices. Basically, it's a mastermind. And I would say this, if you're older and you're looking to reinvent yourself, get in a mastermind with some folks that are a little younger who run at a different pace. And if you're young and you lack the discipline and the understanding, get with some people who are veterans, who've seen it, done it, and can mentor you through the process. The energy back and forth is what helps both groups succeed. And they need each other. It's symbiotic. If you don't have one without the other, stagnation happens in an industry. Older folks have figured out how to do it with less work because they know what to cut out. Millennials, they're the hardest working generation we've seen in a long time. People don't understand. They will sit and work 18 hours a day, especially when they find something they love. But what they need is some guidance. So the blend of those things, get in mastermind groups, get with 6 or 8 people and meet once a week, on Zoom. We're all learning how to use Zoom for an hour and celebrate your wins. And then let a couple people ask some questions and get mentored by the group like a hot seat. Getting feedback from your peers who are in the game with you is one of the fastest ways to accelerate your growth. Surround yourself with people who are just as hungry and just as dedicated professionally. Tony talks about the power of peer group. Proximity is power. Who are you putting yourself in proximity with? You'll become the 5 people you surround yourself with most. We've seen that economically. We've seen that in relationships, and we always see it professionally. So get yourself a good peer group, and don't just talk. Come in with an outcome and mastermind so that you're sharing a flow of good ideas, and all boats will rise as the tide rises in the group.
Love it. Love it. And I know, Mike, you're very humble and you don't want to toot your own horn, but I'm also going to add coaching is huge. Okay. You have coached me and you have helped a ton of our agents. Wally, our last guest speaker, like I said earlier, worked with you, I know, for many years. And Mike is also available for you all. Yes, he's got a tight schedule right now, but Mike, I'm tooting your own horn again. In fact, what I'm going to do here, if you don't mind, can you share where everyone can get a hold of you if they want some more information or just to see some of your content?
Sure. I mean, funny enough, I don't have, websites set up and all that stuff, but if they email me at Core Coach, it's just mjsavage@corecoach.com. Myself or my assistant would get back to them. Or the easiest way to get a hold of me, honestly, is just call Tony Robbins and say, hey, listen, I heard Mike, and they'll talk with a coaching consultant. And here's the truth. I love coaching, but I may not be the right coach for that person. The great thing about Robbins is there's 100 coaches, and they can put them through a process where they do an intake, they go through a questionnaire, they do a personality and communication assessment, and they pair them with the right coach. If they want to work with me, they just have to say that they want to work with me, and they'll get them into my roster. So either way is perfectly fine.
Or just let me know, send me an email or call me, and I'll also put you in touch. And Mike, also your Instagram page has some great content you share. You should follow Mike. What is it? Just Mike Savage? Is that your username?
Michael J. Savage, or they can just look up Coach Savage because I have it under Coach Savage as well.
Perfect. Okay, definitely check him out. And I promise you he brings great value to the table, especially when he has time to actually dive in, which today, unfortunately, we only have about 45 minutes. So I wanted to just shed some light and make sure that everybody walked away with some nuggets. I'm going to close up with just a few things here, and then we'll put a bow on this. But right now, okay, I don't care what industry you're in, okay, and actually Mike taught me this about getting scrappy. Now is the time. You got to get hungry, scrappy, get creative. I would have these webinars, okay, on Zoom or GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar. I would start to record your YouTube channel and your videos. It's free, okay? It's a time to get proactive with technology and make sure that this never happens to you again if you're falling a little bit behind, okay? Learn from this. Ask the right questions, as Mike just said. Sometimes that can lead you down a completely different path. Another bullet, right now, again, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, customers and prospects are home. They don't have a choice. Now is the time to pick up the phone or send an email and set the appointment. Or if it has to be a face-to-face, set the appointment for 2 months from now. But pick up the phone, okay, because people are home and they want to talk. And I'll tell you the proof of that. We're doing 2 webinars a week now. Our attendance is double and triple of what it was before. So people are open to listening. Now's the time. Get on the phone, get on a webinar, learn how to use Zoom, okay, whatever the case is. But now is the time, and you will come out of this stronger than ever, okay? I promise you that. Okay, so with that said, I want to thank everyone for taking the time. I hope you walked away with some great info. Mike, man, it's been a real pleasure once again. You always come through for us. For me personally, I can't thank you enough. So I appreciate you for taking the time once again. Thank you, everyone. Power through this. Jump on the webinars. Listen to the podcast, Bill Levinson Experience. Thank you again. We'll see you on the other side. Take care. Appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us for the Bill Levinson Experience. Please feel free to share this podcast with anyone you think would be interested. You may also visit levinsonandassociates.com and all of Bill Levinson's social media pages for more.